All right, so let's talk about some things that you should remember or should remember to do for your AP exam that will help you keep those points that you know you're ready to earn. Step number 1, especially on free response, read the question. Go straight to the question. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. Go straight to the question, because what you're doing by reading the entire paragraph that shows that gives all the information for the problem is you're wasting time, because you're going to have to go back and reread it anyway once you read the question, once you know what you're looking for. So once you read the question, interpret it. What are you trying to find? What kind of an answer are they looking for? Are they looking for a number? Are they looking for a sentence? Are they looking for an explanation? Are they looking for a graph or an equation? So figure out what you're trying to find. Once you know what your answer needs to be, then figure out what tools you need to find it. So, do you need to take the derivative? Do you need to integrate? Are there any values that you need to use in a table, an initial condition, in the graph, anything like that? This is when you read through that huge paragraph that has all the information about a continuous function, a differentiable function, f is the integral of g, yada, yada, yada. So again, go straight to the question itself. Go straight to part A. And then what are you trying to find? What does it want you to give as an answer? And then if you figure that out, what do you need to find that answer? Next thing you need to remember, show your work. Especially for calculator problems. Those are the problems where you don't really need to write too much in terms of doing out your work, because you're doing it all in the calculator. However, you need to show the AP reader what you're doing. If you're taking the integral, write down integral of your function. If you're finding the derivative, write down dy dx equals, So show them what your thinking process is before you just write your answer. Also pertaining to showing your work, label your work. When you write down an expression or an equation, what is that expression equal to? Is it y? Is it y prime? Is it y double prime? You need to label your work, because oftentimes you're working with multiple functions and your AP reader is not a mind reader. They don't know if you're working with f or with g, so you need to label your work. For example, let's say that they give you f of x equals x squared and they ask you to find the derivative. What I often see on tests is this. That's all, just 2x. Now, 2x, what is that? What does that represent? You need to show that this represents the derivative of f of x. So make sure that you're including that label there. And that also means making your work look very clear, very organized. You don't want your AP book, your answer booklet, to look like scratch work. You want it to look like a notebook, like somebody was writing down very neatly, very nicely, very organized. Make it easy for the AP reader to follow what you're doing. There should be no guesswork when it comes to reading your work. Also pertaining to labeling, make sure you identify your variables. If you're using the function f, use that name. Use f equals. Or when you're talking about f, say f does this or f does that. When you're talking about the derivative, don't just say the derivative, say f prime does this. Or if you're talking about the derivative of the function g, say g prime does this or has this. And also when you're using u substitution, let's say that you're integrating sine of 2x and you need to use u substitution, and the u would be 2x, so you put 1/2 integral of sine of u du, and that's all you write. On the AP test, they have no idea what u is. You need to identify that. So the proper way would be to say, oh, u equals 2x, du is 2dx, and then go from there. You need to do this step in order to identify new variables. You cannot use new letters, new variables, if you have not said what they are equal to at that point. The next thing to remember is to answer the question or questions. Once you think you've found an answer, go back and reread the question. If they ask you to do multiple things for one part of the question, so let's say part A asks you to find the derivative and then use the derivative to do something, make sure that you're answering all parts of that. So you're not just answering the final question, you're not just giving the derivative or using the derivative for something. Make sure that you're showing each part. So again, for that example, find the derivative of f and use that to determine when x is 2. So you want to first find the derivative, show your work for finding the derivative and provide that answer, and then use that to do the next part of the question. So make sure you're showing your work for all steps in the problem. We don't always do this, but your best bet to get full credit for your answer is to make sure that you answer in a complete sentence. Why is this important? It will require that you use labels or units. So when you're answering the question and it's a problem that has units, make sure you use those properly. Answering in a complete sentence will require that you restate the question. That's your best way to do it. Go to the question and just change that question into a statement and add your answer to it. So if it says, what is the derivative when x is this? You could say, the derivative when x is that is blah, 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 blah. So restate the question when you're providing that answer. And therefore, that means that you know that you've answered all parts of the question. And last but not least, do not use the word it to refer to something. If it has a name, use that name. If it has a label, so if you're talking about the function f, use f, don't use it. If you're talking about the derivative of g, use dg dx or use g prime. Don't use the word it. And this is important because oftentimes in one particular problem, you'll be working with several functions, whether it's the original versus derivative or two separate functions f and g or anything like that. So oftentimes you're working with more than one function. So if you use the word it, the AP reader doesn't know which function you're talking about. Now let's talk about timing. Time is going to be your worst enemy on this test. So you want to do everything you can to take advantage of the time that's given to you. When you complete step 1, read through the questions. If you find ones that you know how to do, complete those first. Get those out of the way. You know you're getting points for those, get those points easily, and then go back and work on the more difficult ones. If you have a problem that you know is going to take you some time, save that for later. Put a star by it saying, I know how to do this, but it's going to take me a while. So get the easy, the quick ones out of the way first. Don't waste your time doing things that are unnecessary. For example, if you're giving an equation and you're doing some manipulating, don't waste your time actually figuring out what that manipulation comes out to. As long as you have what they're looking for, let's say they want y equals and you're getting y by itself, don't bother simplifying the right-hand side. Just get y by itself and you're done. As long as you have answered the problem in their terms, then you're good. And also, if there's 2 different ways to solve a problem, don't choose the longer way. You know that you don't have time to do that, so definitely do the one that's easiest. And you should keep your answers short and sweet. In the previous slide, I told you to write a sentence, but instead of just writing willy-nilly, take the question and restate it as part of your answer. That will allow you to go straight into the point. Don't spend all of your time writing this beautiful paragraph about why the answer is what it is. Don't write a textbook, just a quick sentence, short and sweet. In relation to avoiding unnecessary steps, on those calculator problems, use it. Use it to your advantage. They give you these questions requiring the use of a calculator for a reason, because they're going to give you problems that are going to take a little bit longer, but the steps that you can use the calculator for will make it much shorter. So if it asks you to find the derivative, don't do that by hand, just use your calculator. And that pertains to any kind of calculator problem. If it's something that you can do in your device, make sure that you're using that to your advantage. Now here's something that I've only mentioned once or twice. On the free response non-calculator portion of the test, you obviously cannot use a calculator. But let's say you've done everything you can in that portion of the test and maybe you have 30 to 20 minutes left over. You can go back and complete the calculator portion of your free response test. However, you cannot use your calculator. So if you're working on the non-calculator section, you've already completed questions 1 and 2 that require the use of a calculator. Let's say that you finished questions 3 through 6. Go back and take a look at questions 1 and 2. See if there's anything you can do without the use of a calculator to try to get some more points. Which means that if you're working on the calculator section, which you will do first, and let's say that you know you're not going to have you're not going to be able to have enough time to finish all of the questions, complete those problems that require the use of the calculator first. Make sure you can get those done, because once you finish this section, in the next section, the non-calculator portion, you can go back and look at your work and try to finish it. So if you need to, start the questions that require the use of a calculator up to the point where you know you can finish it algebraically by hand. And then if you have time, finish it. If not, come back to it when you're finished with the non-calculator part. Okay, let's talk about problem solving. One of the biggest struggles that people have is that they don't know where to start. They read the question, they know they're supposed to get to a certain point, but they don't know what to do to get there. So I've got a few steps for you guys to figure out how to get to your answer. The first step, read the question. What am I trying to find? What are they asking me to do? Once you figure that out, once you've figured out the what, now you need the how. How do I get to my answer? So basically you got to think, what do I need? If I'm trying to find a derivative, do I need an equation? Or do I need the slope? Or do I need the average slope? If I'm trying to find the integral, do I have the equation that I can integrate? Or do I have a graph? What do I need to do with that? How do I find the integral based on the information that's given? Once you've figured out the what and the how, you need to know what else is given to you. So what do I know? What information do I have that I could use to get to my answer? Do you have a graph? Okay, how can I use the graph to get to my answer? Do you have an equation? How can I use the equation to get to my answer? Or a table, or an initial condition? So these 3 questions will get you started, and everything else you already know. You know the math, you know the calculus, so all you need to know is how to use it. Read the question, what are you trying to find? Based on that, how do you get there? And what do you know that you can use to get to your answer?